Welcome to another week of Bible time, and welcome to another book as we work our way through the scriptures together. And today we're coming to the book of Ruth. And in the book of Ruth, which it tells us right off the bat is happened during the time when the judges were ruling in Israel, we're going to get another snapshot of life during the time of the judges. Now, you might remember the last 5 chapters of the book of Judges gave us 2 separate snapshots of what life was like during the time of the judges, and those were particularly dark pictures. They were pictures of sin and immorality and division. All kinds of problems were going on during that time. Well, we're going to get a different picture from the book of Ruth, that we're going to see that even during those dark days, God was showing grace and God was actually saving people. And Ruth would be the prime example. I mean, that great statement there in chapter 2, verse 12, where Boaz says about Ruth, "The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." What a great statement of conversion. What a great statement of someone coming to the Lord. And you, if you've read the chapters, you're familiar with the story. There was this couple named Elimelech and Naomi. They were living in Bethlehem as times were tough there. There was a famine, and so they went next door to Moab to live there for a while. And they had 2 sons that went with them. And while they're in Moab, their 2 sons marry 2 Moabites. So there's a lot of things that aren't going really the way they should here. They're leaving. They're not trusting. They're giving their sons to. They're taking Moabite women for their sons. But 10 years later, all the men are dead, and Naomi comes back, and Ruth, one of the daughters-in-law, decides to come with her. And as they move back to Bethlehem, Ruth decides she needs to go out into the field and glean so that she and Naomi have food to eat. And she happens to come into the field of Boaz, who is a relative of Elimelech's family. And so that's how the story gets started, and how Ruth and Boaz get connected. The big picture here is that this is establishing for us, the book of Ruth is establishing for us the line of David. Which is going to lead into the book of Samuel, where you're going to see David anointed to be king of Israel. Well, this gives you kind of the background of where David came from. And I just want to go back, and as we think about these first 2 chapters, and we think about what's happened in Ruth's life, I just want to go back to the demonstration of God's grace. There's a lot of things that were going wrong in Israel at that time, a lot of things that Elimelech and Naomi they didn't make the right decisions, but God was showing grace. And I just want to show you and point out to you the demonstrations of God's grace during this time. One is that he shows grace to a Gentile. Ruth is a Moabite. She's not Jewish. She's a Gentile. God is saving a Gentile. And the Moabites, they had quite a history. You can go all the way back to Genesis chapter 19. The Moabites came about as a result of an incestuous relationship between Lot and one of his daughters. And you might remember when we went through the book of Numbers, Numbers 22 through 25, the Moabites resisted Israel coming through. They hired a prophet to try to curse them, and they wound up seducing them into immorality. That's the Moabites right there. And then we even saw them in the book of Judges, Judges chapter 3. The Moabites were oppressing the Israelites. Eglon was their king, and you might remember that he was done in by a faithful Jewish man named Ehud. Ehud, the left-handed dude. But anyways, God here is showing grace in saving a Moabite, a Gentile. Also, you see that grace overcomes idolatry. Grace overcomes idolatry. In chapter 1, verses 15 and 16, they've kind of come to a crossroads. Naomi's coming back. Her 2 daughter-in-laws are with her. The one daughter-in-law decides to go back to her family, but Ruth says, "No, I'm going with you." And here's what it says, verse 15, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you, for where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, your God, my God. And so she's turning from the Moabite idolatry. They had a god named Chemosh, and they practiced child sacrifice to this idol. But now she's saying, no, I want to be with you, and I want to follow your God. And so she's being saved out of her idolatry. And she recognizes that the worst that God has to offer is better than the best that the world has to offer. And she's saying, no, I want to be with your God. And that's the way it happens. That's the way it happens for you and me. If you're a real Christian, that you have turned from idolatry to God. As it says in 1 Thessalonians 1:9 regarding the Thessalonians, that they turned from idols to serve the living and the true God. That's true conversion there. That's the true turning. You turn from idolatry, all your other gods, and you come to serve the true and living God. And also what we're going to see, especially it's introduced in chapter 2 and it's going to be developed in the rest of the book, is that grace provides a redeemer. Grace is extended to Gentiles. Grace delivers you out of idolatry because grace provides a redeemer. This is the Hebrew word goel. And Boaz is the redeemer in this story. It says in verse 20 of chapter 2 that Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, may he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead. Naomi also said to her, the man, Boaz, is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers. Yeah, they had kinsman redeemers, and they were to redeem you in a physical sense, and that's what we're going to see Boaz doing, but it's going to really be much more than that. And there were responsibilities built into this kinsman redeemer, and there were certain qualifications, and as we'll see as we read the rest of the book, there were certain qualifications that a redeemer had to meet. He had to be a blood relative. Well, that's true of Boaz because of he's related to Elimelech. He has to pay the price of redemption. We're going to see that in chapters 3 and 4. And he must redeem willingly, because there was a closer relative who could have redeemed them, but he wasn't willing to do it for a variety of reasons. Boaz was willing to do it. And what you see here, too, is obviously this book is a setup not only to the line of David, because Boaz and Ruth are going to be the great-grandparents of David, but it's beyond David to the ultimate Redeemer. The ultimate Redeemer. And when you think about these qualifications, well, Christ meets them all. He had to be a blood relative. Yeah, that's why he became a man. He had to become one of us in order to redeem us. He had to pay the price of redemption. He did that with his own blood on our behalf, and he had to do it willingly. Those are amazing things. It's one thing to redeem a relative and their property. It's another thing to redeem sinners for God. That's what Christ has done for us. Boaz did all three of these in this picture, in this story, and that provides a picture for us of Christ, our Redeemer, which, by the way, they're going to be, Christ physically is going to be a descendant of Boaz and Ruth. So we're just getting started here in Ruth. We're looking forward to doing more tomorrow. It's exciting studying the Bible together. And I look forward to doing it with you again tomorrow as we continue Bible time.